And I believe the ball is rolling again. And there we go. Welcome again to Save My EU, a boring and totally uninteresting way of looking at the European parliamentary elections, gently and calmly, with looking at interesting subjects, but not getting them all the way into the usual shouting. First of all, I'd like to thank for some of the comments that the green race topic actually started up. It was interesting. It seems that there might be more into this worth getting back to. We'll see what happens after these planned episodes here, but clearly the idea of looking positively at the challenge of climate change instead of just crying out, even though of course there is a reason for distress, it was interesting. We'll perhaps get back to that. But today we're getting onto a far more interesting subject. No, far more boring subject. Today's topic is Russia. Of course, a topic, well, as we'll see, about everything in Europe and the EU. But I realized that we're also going into the fake news and all that in the area. So this is kind of a two-topic segment that we have. Today we have fake news and we have Russia in that order. Let's see what kind of fun stuff we can get out from those. I hope you'll be as bored as I am. Indeed, it seems that there is no way to talk about Russia without talking about fake news and influencing elections. I would like to go back in history a little bit. First of all, I found an interesting Wikipedia article. Let me show it to you here. Foreign electoral intervention. The text is way too small. The point is, I just wanted to see how long just this area here of subjects there. And there's only a few examples. I mean, many countries have had more studies about foreign intervention in elections for much longer. But this is like the international headlines of the matter. There's a lot of interesting articles. I took some time to go around. I looked for some local sources and international sources. And this is old news. Fake news is old news. Influencing foreign elections is old news. This is nothing we haven't seen before. It was said that during the time of the Cold War, there were very few elections in all of Europe where both dollars and rubles didn't flow around. Now, some of these, of course, elections have been featured on this list that I mentioned, many others not. It was common practice. Now, the fact that we know that Russia does this, it's good news for us because we know they do it. We know how influencing elections happens. It used to be very common to buy off political parties, key speakers. But of course, now with social media, we're talking directly to the people. So it's a little bit different, but it's still all the same. We understand the purposes. We understand the goals. This is not a new wild thing we need to panic about. We understand. But it's good to look at this history a little bit. And if possible, let's look at it honestly. And I found a few interesting, like Foreign Affairs, a Cold War case of Russian collusion. Now, we're talking about Reagan-era stuff in the United States. Of course, we're talking about the EU, but it's a good idea to remember that this is an international playing ground. Other interesting hits, Nazis and communists tried it too. Foreign interference in US elections dates back decades. In the 40s already, Nazi Germany did it. Later on, the communists did it. And this is an old story. Very good read here. This is where I think we get into the good points. This is not just a Russian matter. Of course, Russia is trying to affect our elections. We know this. They have done that as the Soviet Union. They are doing it as Russia. They are trying to influence other countries. However, This was a very interesting article here I found on Medium, and just focusing on a key point here. Electoral interference by the US and Russia has been standard operating procedure for the last 7 decades. Standard operating procedure. This is Blake Fleetwood, a former New York Times reporter, has been doing this and writing this. I found something in the New York Times too. Russia isn't the only one meddling in elections. We do it too, and we, in that case, means the United States. I know we're looking at the EU, but it's good to remember the whole package here. Other parties want to influence what happens here. It's very probable that if I looked and Googled up a little bit, China wants to influence our decisions too. And European country A wants to influence European country B there. And the European Parliament, the parties in the European Parliament are based on collaboration between countries, parties in many countries. So information crosses borders. We know that. It's good to keep it in mind. It's good to know the current methods. It's very good to know the risks. Someone might say Trump, someone might say Brexit, populist votes here and there. Someone would mention Italy, someone would mention France, someone would say Germany, yada, yada, yada. Long list. Good to keep up with them, but this is not anything brand new. And I'm going to put a local matter here as well, because this was it pretty well summed it up. There was a book called Laboratory Finland. It was a time of our former president and KGB shortly after the Second World War. Now, to sum up my point here, what happened was KGB, there we go, that is the KGB logo right here, sent rubles, and they sent it to people that would influence their matters. And you know what? The CIA, you know, their logo is way more boring. They sent dollars here. Yes, that's a $2 bill. And again, send it to people in various positions, various organizations all around. And this has been happening. Money changes hands before the election. Today, we can be more public about it. We can easily find out the sources of money. And, of course, the KGB isn't what it used to be, one might say. But these same principles apply. They applied in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and on and on. At some point, of course, Russia stopped having any money, but they still found a way to influence us one way or the other. And this is the history, and this is to today. There has been fake news. There has been other affecting elections for a long time. Now, what are we doing about this? It's pretty much every day that you can read about social media platforms' war on fake news. And this is good. I mean, like opposing vaccinations, that actually kills people. That kind of fake news causes much painful deaths, usually in those who can least protect themselves, like children. It's very good that we have our eyes open. Everyone knows that the social media platforms aren't doing enough, but they're doing this and that. Now, I poked up something interesting. A lot of interesting things, but for example, this is from Google. This is for the European elections, and I'm again going to quote a single part of this. YouTube videos are going to have a special check mark if they come from major news corporations, because in some countries this means only public broadcasters. Usually this means public and private major broadcasters as well. Now, allow me to present to you a problem. Now, I am not against marking verified news. This is one of the many good things social media platforms are doing. I'm not fighting it, but now this is the big news ones that are mentioned here. Big news outlets. Now, suppose there's a village in the Czech Republic. Okay, for example, they have 500 inhabitants. There is a local business operation there going. International business operation maybe has something to do with nature, maybe it has something to do with mining, energy production. I don't know, but something that the EU law directly affects. It's a key point for these upcoming elections. But it involves this village. There's 500 people in there. Now, they might have a little village news outlet because they're really interested in this. They really care about this matter. Now, this might be run voluntarily by a retired journalist and a student. They might have a website with these news. It's not an official outlet, but it has information. Important information. It could be very well factual, correct information, but it's not accepted as an official source. Of course, I'm not expecting Google to read every news bit and check every source to say which is credible, which is not. I'm just pointing out the risk here. When we're dealing with the fight against fake news, we tend to use pretty heavy guns. And for one, heavy guns are not very accurate. There's collateral damage, and they don't always hit. It's good that we're defending ourselves, but honestly, with fake news, I think there's precisely one solution that actually works. Unfortunately, it's boring, long-term, not very interesting. However, I find it is this: media criticism. The act of closely examining and judging the media. We need to know what we're looking at. We need to be able to question. Is this a fact? Did this happen? Is this how it's going? If there's something really interesting on your social media feed that's happening right now, or you see in one news site, looks really big, does it appear in another one? What's the source? Where did this come from? Is it too good or too bad to be true, perhaps? Why rush to share it on your social media feed? Why rush to angrily comment about a matter you're not sure about? Did you even check the date? That might be 5-year-old news. I come across those all the time. I've honestly made the mistake myself of sharing a news article and only realized it was 3 years old. That happens to us. Take a moment. Your life will not end. Your life will not diminish if you don't share the latest and hottest thing. Wait and see what it's about. Think. Go for a walk. Ponder about it. Find some new fancy way of commenting it that's not just one of the 10,000. Oh my God, look at that thing. That's so horrible, or that's so wonderful. Why be one of the 10,000? Why not be one of the 10? Those who have really a well-thought point out in their mind for them. Go for a walk, seriously. It gives you ideas for these things. And in all, media criticism, I have to repeat this here. It's something we need to teach, learn, and never stop learning. Media criticism has to be more of a way of life, not just, okay, let me just watch a YouTube video about it. Let me just read about it 15 minutes. Let's just give the kids a 1-hour class in school. And we shall also remember that journalists are people. No, I don't have a slide or picture for that. I'm assuming you know what person thingy means. Journalists are biased. Every journalist has a bias. Remember that. The good journalist is the one who realizes that they have a bias, knows to look at that bias and then work around it, understand it, that, okay, this is a matter I'm having an issue with. Maybe I should ask a colleague to do this, or maybe I will challenge myself to look at the other viewpoint. And, I never said journalism was easy. It really isn't. It takes a lot of hard work, but you have to remember the journalists as people, as good journalists realize about themselves. Knowledge is the only tool we have against fake news. Fake news and affecting elections is nothing new. It has happened. It is happening right now, and it will happen. Okay. With that background done, let's get into the more interesting part of today. Tra-la-la. I should probably hum some kind of notes here, but I'd probably be violating copyright, so let's just do this silently. Russia. A very big player in what happens in EU anywhere. That's actually where I'd like to start from a little bit. Russia is the story anywhere, and I googled up again a little bit about EU-Russia relationships, and for example in Euronews I found dozens of current articles about every country, every subject, and we're always talking about it. Of course, before we move too much further, maybe we should focus on a key event, something to wrap it together. Okay, Crimea. Now, the official EU text is that Russia annexed, but I'm sorry, I don't buy it. Russia conquered Crimea. They sent soldiers into an independent country, and they conquered it and took a piece of it and connected it to Russia. That is factual. The fact that those Russian soldiers did not wear their usual uniforms does not change anything. They sent Russian soldiers there. We could, of course, talk if Crimea actually wanted this, except, of course, the few minorities. But hey, who cares about minorities, right? But did the Crimeans want to connect to Russia? Actually, I mean, we don't know. The election there was a joke. But was it because this is what they've always felt, or was this because of years of propaganda, information warfare towards them that made them think this way? We don't know. How long did Russia plan for this anyway? But they did what they did. EU had to react. Now, would the EU have reacted as strongly if this didn't happen right in our backyard, but say in Southern America? Honestly, yes, I think we would have. EU has to show that it reacts to these matters, and one way or the other, we would. Now, did these sanctions have an effect? I mean, you can look at numbers and this business suffering that way. Did they have an effect? Is Crimea any closer to being returned to Ukraine? No, not at all. In fact, the EU paid a heavy price for these sanctions. A lot of billions were lost. Many businesses suffered. It was not good for us either. But we had to do something. And of course, we had to put the sanctions. Could we have done something that would have really changed the game? Not as EU is right now. The EU would have to be very different. Very differently led military superpower to have done something. And honestly, that's not an EU I would have liked to live in. But here we come to the issue of the game we're playing, the sanctions game. Okay, I'm actually holding this pen here, stylus here, for point. The sanctions are right now in this point here, in the middle. When they're in the middle, what the Russian media does is they speak the story of this is how the West is trying to destroy us. This is how they're trying to make us choose a puppet Western-minded president for this. They're trying to attack us on our way of life. That's what the Russian media says. Were we to increase sanctions, move forward, more of them, okay, then they would just get more angry. They would put a lot of exclamation marks with the same thing. This is the proof. They really are trying to change our leadership. They're trying to decide for us. They're trying to destroy our democracy, our way of life, and everything. We decrease sanctions, okay, go that way instead. What would happen is they would celebrate. Look, the West admitted they were wrong and we were right. And again, they win. Keep, increase, decrease, they win. Now, that's the problem with the game we're playing. And I made something so fancy. Oh, you're going to love it. Let me show you. Here we go. A few things where Russia is involved now. Any of these matters we talk about, Russia is always having a say. Russia is always lifted to the point. There's so many, but I mean, honestly, there isn't a single matter that we don't talk about in the EU where we don't raise Russia as a point. They might not raise it. They might not have a say, but we certainly will put Russia on the map no matter what we talk about. We always will. We always seem to. Any criticism against the EU, immediately someone says, this is Russian trolls, this is Russian information warfare. And then the RT gets a wonderful clip there and they show, oh, look, the Europeans and their liberal media again found Russian trolls. Where were they this time? Were they in the cupboard? Were they under the soap there? Were they hiding in the closet, under the bed? They make jokes of this. We give them free material to make jokes of us because we can't seem to talk about anything without Russia being involved in there. Now, I certainly am not a doctor. I'm also not an expert in Russia. I have not been there. I don't speak the language. Probably I should also say I'm not a Russian troll, but then you would say that's what they all say, so I'm not going to say it. But I've listened to a lot of talk about Russia, Russians, a lot of lengthy podcasts, views that go deeper, not just what we see on the top, but a lot of analysis on Russian and Russia. And as a country, I feel they're suffering from world superpower hangover. Now, this is a chemistry of a hangover. I don't know how straightly it applies to international politics, but this is something that former world superpowers like Russia and the Great Britain seem to be suffering from. The picture isn't related, but it's very fancy. It was really well done. Now, thank you for Compound Chem for allowing people to share it along. I'm not going to modify it, of course, but just imagine you're seeing the world superpower words there. The Russians have said it themselves. The fall of the Soviet Union was the greatest tragedy of the previous century. They've said it. At the heyday of the Soviet Union, they were the power to rival the great United States, the two big powers. They could say, they didn't have to do more than whisper and they were heard. Right now, they're not an economic superpower. They're not a science superpower. They're not a military superpower. They're not a space superpower, even though they do have great skills in that matter. They do have wonderful culture, a lot of wonderful people there. But by any numbers, Russia is not a superpower. It only has the hangover of a superpower. Okay? And we're feeding it. Every time we put Russia on discussion, we're feeding them. We're giving them, look, we're important. Look, they're talking about us again. We're giving them more fuel to this. And this is not a Putin issue. This is a Russia issue. And from all that I've heard, every well-written book, journalist interview, analysis about Russia suggests to me that they would rather suffer in cold and hunger than fall down to Western demands. They would rather take it and suffer no matter how much needed before giving in to anything we demand. So this sanctions game, it's a Western game. It's what we play. It's what the EU plays. It's something that the Trump plays, but someone should remind them that it's not a toy. It's an actual thing. But it's not the same for Russia. It simply is not. There's a whole way of life matter here. If we want to affect them in some way, we need to stop feeding their world superpower feelings. And with that, I present to you a wonderful idea that's absolutely not original. What we need to do is make Russia boring for once. Yes, you can obviously see where I stole the idea from, but that's the key. Now, for example, with oil, okay, we can buy it from anywhere. There are some technical issues. Our refineries are, most of them, designed for Russian oil. it would put a lot of extra money if we were to use oil that came from somewhere else, like Saudi Arabia or USA or Norway, for example. They're a little bit different kinds of oil. But in general talks, let's say sanctions. Okay, sanctions. They, on any meeting, they are the number one topic of discussion. They're the number one key point there. But if we use this method, they would not be the number one point. They would be there in section 17, subparagraph 13. And there would be, okay, as for the sanctions, the situation has not changed. Let's keep them going. Boink, next subject. Let's decrease the volume that we use about Russia. Let's not raise them all the time. Let's not give them that free publicity. Let's not make them look bigger than they are. They are a tiny economic power. They are a tiny military power. And reports from Syria, when in the war by proxy, the Russian and Western forces ended up fighting together, the Russian forces were wiped out so totally, so absolutely. Their military machine it's old and it's rusty. It's not worth our constant fear. Of course, we have to keep our eyes open. We have to be ready, determined, but let's not give them such a huge voice. Let's handle them like just one country among others. Oh, we're going to need to buy some natural gas. Oh, well, there's a lot of places we get it from. Oh, there's Norway, there's United States, this and that. Oh, yeah, Russia's there too. What else? Oh, yeah, we might choose this or that. Okay, well, maybe Russia. Not make a big noise of it. Media, the parliamentarians, leaders, everyone, stop fueling that feeling that Russia is a superpower. It is not. If they one day want to be a superpower, they'll need to change the game. But we're not going to fuel it for them. We're not going to give them the tools for free. And, I mean, we're not closing any borders. We're just talking less about Russia, less and less. We're going to make them feel boring. If they one day decide to choose leadership that wants to play by international rules, of course, hey, we're here, welcome, let's talk, let's make deals. And cultural exchange, travel, tourism, this wouldn't have to be affected in any way, but just politically, let's stop making them look so high and mighty. Let's make Russia boring for once. And I really like this because, remember, the theme for this vlog is boredom. Boring analysis about subjects. Let's use my theme for Russia. They're not interesting. They're just one little boring player there, an angry kid who thinks he's a really big and high and mighty kid, but he's just one kid along the block. Nothing more. So let's keep him like that. And with that boring analysis, I thank you, and let's see where we go next time. I plan to make these twice a week. I might add, of course, if sickness or some travel plans come, I will have to drop from that, but I will aim for twice a week before the EU elections. Thank you for watching and being boring.